They are some of the world's most notorious serial killers.
He was like a god when he had a corpse as his plaything.
But were these psychopaths born evil, or did their mothers make them into monsters? I'm Donald McIntyre, and I'm on a quest to explore how some of history's most horrific murderers were moulded by their dysfunctional relationships with their mothers.
When it comes to people who are pathological, psychopathic, the influence of the mother is absolutely dominant.
I'll be piecing together events in their childhoods and talking to criminologists and psychologists to try to understand what motivated their monstrous crimes.
We never come across a serial killer who'd killed that many people.
In this programme, the Polish killer Leszek Pekalski. He confessed to a spree of 67 sexual murders, including men, women and children as victims. Were these confessions the work of Poland's most prolific serial killer, or the fantasies of a deranged mind?
He's somebody whose behaviour is off the Richter scale.
Leszek Pekalski is one of Poland's most notorious murderers. In 1996, he was convicted of murder and rape, and he's still behind bars. And it was in these woods near Bytów in rural northern Poland where his murderous career would reach its terrifying climax. 28-year-old Pekalski was living a rough in the woods. He was hungry, desperate, and begged a young 17-year-old shop assistant called Sylwia for food.
Wyglądało to w ten sposób, że rozmawiali, ona go poczęstowała, tym rozmawiali i on zaczął się do niej przytulać. Mówił, że jest samotny.
He asked her for sex. She brushed away his advances. Humiliated and enraged, he caved her skull in with a spade.
Sylwia zmarła od uderzeń, od ciosów w głowę, a potem po śmierci wykorzystał seksualnie jej zwłoki.
The police identified Pekalski as the perpetrator of this horrific crime and arrested him here in his hometown of Oszeki. And when he was questioned, he admitted to dozens of other murders, men, women and children, in cases which have baffled the police in Poland for nearly a decade. Police initially charged Pekalski with 17 crimes, ranging from assault to rape and murder. But when it got to court, only 2 indictments remained. After claims of mishandling of key evidence by the police, Pekalski was found guilty of just one murder, that of 17-year-old Sylwia. In 1996, he was found guilty of this murder and sentenced to 25 years in jail. Many, though, within the criminal justice system still think he committed scores of the crimes he confessed to. How did Pekalski turn into this monster? And how did his relationship with his mother make him into a murderer?
I think it's true to say that he wouldn't have become a killer if it hadn't have been for actions taken by his mother.
In 1966, Leszek Pekalski was born here in the small farming village of Oszeki, about 70 kilometres from the Baltic Sea. His mother, Cecilia, was a farmhand and had a reputation for being loud and for having a problem with alcohol. She found it very difficult to hold down any stable relationship. Her existence was basic. Her main interests were men and alcohol and little else.
Jedyną ich rozrywką był alkohol i seks. Cecylia Pekalska była kobietą łatwą i miała bardzo wielu partnerów seksualnych.
In a Catholic country and a small rural community, Pekalski's mother would have been frowned upon and she would have been stigmatised, and any child of hers would have shared that stigmatisation.
So when Cecilia fell pregnant, none of the villagers in this tight-knit community were shocked at all. And there's evidence that there was damage done to Leszek before he was even born.
Ciąża Cecylii była przypadkowa. Ta ciąża zupełnie nie przeszkadzała jej w tym, żeby nie zmieniła jej nawyków codziennych, czyli dalej zachowywała się tak samo, dalej piła alkohol. Cecylia piła w pracy, piła po pracy. To był taki czas w Polsce, kiedy ludzie w pracy pili, ponieważ było na to przyzwolenie.
Her abuse of him started even before he was born. Children who've been exposed in utero to alcohol have cognitive difficulties. They're more likely to have learning difficulties. So it's hard for them to make sense of social cues and to take opportunities to learn and grow in the way that we would.
Cecilia gave birth to twins. Her daughter Joanna was healthy, but Leszek was born with some obvious mental impairments.
Wtedy, co Calina urodziła, to ja akurat pracowałam w szpitalu. Już tak inaczej główką ruszał i nie. No to było widać, że on będzie opóźniony, nie? No wzięła, nie? Dziewczynkę tylko tam, Joasię na rączki, nie? A już Leszka już nie.
Cecilia showed little affection towards her new son. She saw him as a burden, especially as the man who'd fathered the twins wanted nothing to do with the children. Cecilia's drinking problems ensured that she struggled to bring up the family on her own.
As with any child that doesn't have a father figure, he would lack somebody to look up to and somebody to show him the way, if you like, and how to treat people and how to treat women in particular.
All he had was a really bad model from his mum and nobody to correct him or to set him straight when his behaviours were errant or went astray.
The little money Cecilia did bring home was spent on fueling her addiction.
Leszek i jego siostra bardzo często głodowali. W tym domu brakowało jedzenia, ponieważ pieniądze zawsze były przeznaczane na alkohol.
Pekalski would be left in the care of his grandmother, but like her daughter, she also had problems with alcohol.
Dwie pijane kobiety w domu, mające zajmować się dzieckiem, to nie może się udać. Także często Leszek nie był karmiony, płakał. To były takie podstawowe zaniedbania wobec tego dziecka.
By the age of 5, Pekalski had already been starved of all the love and attention and even the basic needs that one would expect from a good mother. But did these poverty-stricken and emotionally barren years sow the seeds for the murderer he'd become? It seems to me that Pekalski's mother really is somebody who is at the lowest end, the lowest rung of society, and she understands that and she drinks herself into an oblivion with the obvious effects on Leszek.
Well, I think we can argue that alcohol starts to have an impact before he's even born because his mother is reportedly quite a heavy drinker. And we know from quite a few studies that there's something called fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And some of those children are born looking quite different from other newborn babies. So the damage is starting to be done before he even comes into the world.
And is there a suggestion that there was a little hint of that alcohol fetal syndrome in Leszek when he was born?
He had some changes in his brain, and we know that for a fact. He behaved in quite strange way for the child, and he was also then mentally ill.
So for some reason she didn't cradle him when he was born, but she did cradle his sister. And of course, that rejection at an early age must have been significant.
His mother, she didn't want him. I think she didn't care about him. Like, he was dirty, he was smelly, so she just created this really cruel world for her son. And we do not know the reason why she did that. Maybe she was a little bit ashamed of his condition.
The mother just does not care about him. He's just an inconvenience. Basically, the child is incredibly needy. Nobody cares about him. He's learning that he can't depend on anybody right now.
I mean, in that rural Catholic community in Poland 30, 40, 50 years ago, I mean, it's quite clear is that the concept of illegitimacy was still quite a label.
I mean, the family was the cornerstone institution of society, wasn't it? It was a real kind of moral organisation of a mother, a father and children. So to come into the world already labelled, already stigmatised, he was just devalued from the moment he came into the world.
Coming up at the hands of his mother, Pekalski learns that violence can be the answer to his problems.
He's somebody whose behaviour is off the Richter scale and he doesn't seem able to stop himself.
Leszek Pekalski is believed to have committed a 12-year spree of rape and murder across Poland between 1984 and 1992. The seeds of this murderous campaign may rest in his dysfunctional childhood. His mother drank heavily while pregnant with him, possibly causing him brain damage. She ignored, neglected and abused him in his early years. But was this alone sufficient to turn him into the murderous, lustful killer he became? Pekalski spent his early years in this rural village of Oszeki in northern Poland. His drink-sodden mother and grandmother were terrible carers, but it was more than just neglect. There was also violence.
Kiedy i on i siostra widzieli, że matka i babcia są pijane, to woleli uciec z tego domu. Woleli się schować w stodole. Powiedzieli, że na pewno coś złego się wydarzy.
Pekalski urodził się na wsi, gdzie przemoc była stosowana wobec dzieci. Matka, babka były bardzo prymitywne w swoim sposobie funkcjonowania. No i tak się wobec niego zachowywały.
Matka i babcia biły go wszystkim, co było pod ręką. Leszek bardzo lubił patrzeć w ogień. Grzebał tam pogrzebaczem, wkładał, wyciągał ten pogrzebacz. Babcię to denerwowało. I kiedyś podeszła do niego, wyciągnęła ten pogrzebacz i ten gorący pogrzebacz przytknęła do jego rączki. To dziecko potem długo nosiło bąble na rękach.
That level of physical abuse would have a profound effect on a child. Children will deal with that either by becoming very, very angry themselves and trying to find people or things that are less powerful than they are that they can enact abuse upon themselves, or they will turn inwards and become emotionally unresponsive. It seems that in Pekalski's case, he very much dealt with the situation by becoming an abuser himself.
Even from an early age at this school here in the village, Pekalski was already being isolated from his fellow classmates. The abuse and neglect he suffered at home, combined with his learning difficulties, meant he was always treated as an outsider. Was this the start of his path to murder?
No widać było, że Leszek jest umysłowo chory, nie? Chodził, nie? Tak bujany, nie? I no to już było widać, no.
Wystarczało, że Leszek pojawił się na podwórku, a natychmiast otaczała go gromadka dzieci, która go popychała, która śmiała się z niego. O, głupi Lesio wyszedł z domu. O, Lesiu, a matka znowu pijana, wyśmiewały się.
Leszek nigdy nie miał przyjaciół. Nigdy. A jeszcze to tak raczej go odrzucali.
He was marked out as different. He was less able, and that must have added to a sense of rage, really, and a sense of injustice. And he must have formed a world view that, in actual fact, nobody cares about me. I'm alienated from everyone.
Pekalski couldn't even turn to his own mother when he was bullied at school. If he had done, he'd only suffer more abuse at her cruel hands.
So Pekalski is learning very quickly and very horribly that his life is clearly worthless and meaningless and not even worth protecting or looking out for.
Pekalski's isolation would soon drive his mindset into a darker terrain. Unable to relate to his peers and beaten by his mother, he would soon take out his frustrations on things that couldn't fight back. He started to torment the animals in the village.
Nie lubił zwierząt. Potrafił kopnąć kota, potrafił podejść z kijem do psa, który był na łańcuchu przy budzie i uderzać kijem tego psa.
It allowed him to find something that was actually less powerful than him. And I think that he would have found pleasure in inflicting pain on animals.
And it clearly suggests that he's learned to be abusive because of the abuse he himself has suffered.
Ktoś opowiadał mi też, że w dzieciństwie Leszek powiesił kota.
Penkalski's fascination with animal cruelty was fueled further by watching the adults in the village behead chickens and slaughter pigs.
Tak jakby mu to dawało jakąś satysfakcję, patrzenie na śmierć tych zwierząt.
It's extremely unusual and very, very worrying that Penkalski would seem to take pleasure in watching animals being killed, seeming to find enjoyment in that. That is very, very concerning, and it's very psychopathic. So I think that this was a very clear cue that there was something wrong with this boy.
If he's able to torture animals and have the power of life and death over them, then that suggests he's learning how good it is to actually have control over something.
But his cruel behaviour towards animals wasn't learned from his mother. So to what extent can we blame her for the flourishing killer within the young Penkalski? It seems that the cruelty towards Leszek knew no bounds.
Because at this point in time when most children are thriving, he's just surviving, isn't he? So in terms of what he's coming to accept as normal, he's seeing violence day in, day out, he's experiencing it. So what he's learning in this situation are a set of violent scripts. So particular ways to behave in certain situations. He's taking violence to be a normal thing.
I think like the most important was that his mother and grandmother, they were attacking him, so he really wanted to take revenge.
So very quickly at school it became apparent to everybody that this kid was different.
He was called bastard, he was called stupid Lesio, and he saw that people are just laughing at him. So he was also rejected at school.
And so his first place where he starts to exercise violence upon animals.
It's probably his way of getting power. He wanted to be in control. Like, he didn't have empathy, he had no ethics, and he didn't feel that those animals suffer.
Well, traditionally, animal abuse has been one of those key behaviours that are a red flag of somebody developing into a violent criminal.
At age 11, Penkalski's mother is no longer able to look after him. Social workers send him off to a care home in Bytov. If life was bad at home, it was about to get an awful lot worse.
W takich ośrodkach dla dzieci upośledzonych niestety bardzo często dochodzi do wykorzystywania, do molestowania wychowanków. Wynika, że prawdopodobnie miał tam kontakty homoseksualne.
Later, Penkalski would recount the abuse he suffered to a psychiatrist.
I was forced into a sexual encounter while at the special needs school in Bytov. 2 boys assaulted me. One held me down while the other touched me down there.
Penkalski was a natural victim in many ways. He was incredibly vulnerable, so he would have been singled out by those who wanted to abuse him.
Wszyscy nim pomiatali, nie zwracali na niego uwagi. Jeśli zwracali na niego uwagę tylko po to, żeby go jakoś wykorzystać, oszukać, nauczył się, że relacje społeczne są napełnione agresją, interesownością i najlepszym sposobem na zaspokajanie swoich potrzeb jest wymuszanie to siłą.
And to him again, this will normalize his sexual behavior and make it appear to him that sexual interactions with your peers are quite a normal currency.
Penkalski's traumatic early sexual experiences undoubtedly warped his view of relationships. On reaching puberty, he develops a singular adolescent obsession, that of finding a girlfriend. It's a fixation he'll carry on for many years, and with tragic consequences.
Dziecka staje się nastolatkiem, zaczyna się jego zainteresowanie seksem. Skarżył się wszystkim nauczycielkom, że on chce koniecznie mieć dziewczynę. Specjaliści mówili o tym, że jego popęd był monstrualny, więc on już wtedy musiał nie dawać sobie rady ze swoim popędem.
To pierwsze słowa, które prawda, rozmawiał z tymi napotkanymi dziewczynami, kobietami, czy się ze mną ożenisz?
But it seems that he did pick up that marriage is somehow connected to sex. You get married and then you are entitled to sex.
His desperate need for an intimate sexual relationship was, of course, a turn-off to his female contemporaries. Pekalski's hopes were crushed again and again as he suffered rejection after rejection from the teenage girls in school.
Czynki w szkole nigdy nie lgnęły do niego, ponieważ on był zawsze brudny. Źle pachniał, ponieważ nigdy nie lubił się myć, ponieważ nikt go też nie nauczył tego dbania o higienę.
Despite these rejections, aged 14, he falls in love with a disabled girl in his school.
Podkochiwał się w dziewczynie upośledzonej z wodogłowiem, bardzo chciał z nią zawrzeć jakiś związek.
On jeździł do dziewczyny, prosząc jej rodziców, żeby mu ją dali. Żeby mu ją dali po prostu, jako żonę, jako kobietę.
But the parents wouldn't allow the relationship. Devastated by yet another rejection, his abnormal adolescent sex drive is now out of control, something he admitted to a psychiatrist many years later.
At age 15, I no longer was able to control my sexual desires. I became a menace and a danger. I began harassing girls and women.
Here's somebody who clearly can't control his sexual impulses. He's somebody whose behaviour is off the Richter scale, if you like, and he doesn't seem able to stop himself.
Where did he get his sexual desires? Did his abusive mother create it, or did he learn it in the various care homes and orphanages he spent his teenage years in? At this stage in his development, he's sent to a state care home, and there he begins to exhibit behaviour which is concerning, and he suffers at the hands of others as well.
Yes, older teenagers, they take advantage of him. He was sexually abused. They try to humiliate him in front of other kids. So he felt even more outsider, and I think this was like the most problematic point of his life.
There's some evidence that he becomes over-sexualized in and around this time.
Like when he was really young, he talked all the time about sex.
He's displaying this kind of sexual inhibition at an age where most children really aren't doing that. So this is an incredibly confused, incredibly disrupted young boy. Whenever we look at people who've committed homicide, very often we'll see abuse in their background. So whilst most homicide perpetrators have been abused, not all abused children go on to harm others. So there's something else that needs to be going on to make that come about.
Coming up, Pekalski's perverted desires explode into rape and murder.
Pekalski's motive for murder was definitely instant sexual gratification.
Leszek Pekalski is a convicted rapist and murderer and is considered one of the most lethal men alive in Poland today. He's been detained in prison for over 25 years and is considered a permanent danger to men, women and children. Aged 18, Pekalski finished vocational school and, having trained as a bricklayer, gets a job on a construction site. But very soon he gets into trouble at work.
Ponieważ pracodawcy Leszka często mieli skargi na niego od współpracujących z nim ludzi, Leszek napastuje jakiegoś mężczyznę w tej brygadzie, bo on wyjątkowo upatrzył sobie jednego mężczyznę, który nie mógł się od niego opędzić, i ten mężczyzna jest już tak tym zniecierpliwiony, jest tak zły, że może tam dojść do bójki.
Pekalski was dismissed from work because of his unacceptable sexual advances.
Jeśli pojawia się jakaś potrzeba, którą chce zaspokoić, musi ją zaspokoić od razu. Nie ma żadnej też autocenzury, nie kontroluje swojego zachowania. Miał kłopoty z wykonywaniem jakiejkolwiek pracy.
At age 21, Pekalski, rejected by the adult world of work, moves back home to his mother to live on benefits. But here, there's no loving welcome, just more of the abuse.
Usiłował podtrzymywać ten kontakt z rodziną, natomiast ta rodzina nigdy nie chciała kontaktu z nim. Te kobiety były wciąż pijane, ten dom był wciąż zaniedbany i wciąż nikt nie okazywał mu żadnego zainteresowania.
Then, in November 1988, even that world was snatched away from him. His mother would die of a heart attack, leaving him homeless and parentless. His circumstances would change, but would his mindset?
Śmierć matki nie zrobiła na Pekalskim specjalnego wrażenia. Trudno opłakiwać kogoś takiego, od kogo się nie dostało nigdy uczucia, miłości, także...
When Pekalski's mother dies, he's not aware of having any great, deep feelings of sadness. And that's not surprising because, let's face it, he was a victim of terrible abuse from his mother, so why would he mourn her?
Following his mother's death, Pekalski would move into his uncle's house here in the village of Osheki. However, the death wouldn't dampen his all-consuming desire for sex and a relationship. This would occupy his every waking hour.
Wszyscy, którzy się z nim zetknęli, podkreślali, że on zawsze prosił o to: pomóż mi znaleźć żonę, pomóż mi znaleźć dziewczynę, nie chcę być sam.
He would have just seen very, very simply that this was his passport, if you liked, to sex. I think he thought that all he had to do was really put out the feelers and that would come back to him.
Na pewno szukał i zaspokojenia seksualnego, jak i pewnie jakiejś bliskości. Szukanie partnerki zaspokajałoby mu kilka potrzeb.
Is he a lovesick man or just looking for the love and affection he never received from his mother?
Bardziej intensywnie zaczął szukać żony, przynajmniej częściej pisał listy do biur matrymonialnych. Wujek złościł się, że wydaje za dużo pieniędzy na znaczki.
Unfortunately, he's not very successful. The only responses he gets are negative ones and rejections. And for him, that must have been an absolutely crushing disappointment.
Kiedy raz Leszek dostał odpowiedź od dziewczyny, był niezwykle podniecony. Niósł ten list jak skarb do swojego pokoju. No, okazało się, że w tym liście został wyśmiany. Kiedy dziewczyna przeczytała, że jest rencistą, że jest upośledzony, napisała mu: jesteś głupi, daj sobie spokój z pisaniem. Im stawał się starszy, tym bardziej zdawał sobie sprawę z tego, że on nie ma szansy znaleźć kobiety.
He must have been thinking to himself, well, what is wrong with me? I am doing everything I can. I'm going through all of these formal channels. And all he's doing is setting himself up for rejection after rejection. And this has got to be tiring, frustrating, and it's got to be soul-destroying.
Pekalski's life then takes an unusual turn. He decides to become a Jehovah's Witness. Why this sudden urge to join a new religious community?
Przystąpienie do Świadków Jehowy nie wynikało z jego wiary, z jego religijności. Widział w tym korzyści dla siebie. Po pierwsze, przychodziły tam młode, atrakcyjne dziewczyny. Była nadzieja na to, że tam znajdzie sobie dziewczynę, tam znajdzie sobie żonę. Czyli miał możliwość kontaktu innego niż w kościele. W kościele msza odbywa się inaczej, spotkania Świadków Jehowy są zupełnie inne.
After 2 years with the Jehovah's Witnesses, Pekalski fails to find any willing partners prepared to marry him. As the years went on, his behaviour became more disturbing and perverted. But was this the fault of his warped mind or the result of years of abuse at the hands of his grandmother, mother, and his peers? So he didn't have the charisma, he didn't have the good looks. He certainly was unsuccessful with girls of his own age. And so his talk was always of sex, of marriage, and yet something he would never achieve.
I think it was this slow realisation that he was never going to fit in anywhere, was he? Because his physical development was delayed, his emotional development was disrupted. He didn't quite know what was normal and what wasn't normal, so it was very difficult for him to gain traction in any part of society.
And he wasn't handsome, he wasn't smart, but somehow he was choosing the girls or women who were very beautiful, who were really smart, who were from the good houses. He really wanted to have a perfect wife.
Is it the sense that his frustration that he was never likely to have a normal relationship must have left a terrible gap in his life?
I think he had some incredibly unrealistic expectations. So he's come from this family environment where his mother is the worst possible mother that there could be. And then he gets to know that, you know, the nuclear family is the ideal family, mother and father, male breadwinner. So he's striving for that, and for him there really isn't any grey area, it's one or the other.
So it seems quite an odd jump that he would join the Jehovah's Witnesses.
He really wanted to be close to people in any way, like sexual or religious, or just want to feel like warm around people. And he has only one aim: he wants to find a wife.
It's that sense of belonging that he wants, isn't it? And I think whenever anybody offers him that branch, that thing to cling on to, he is going to cling on to it with dear life. And I think the first people to come along were people from the faith of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
It seems to me he has a curious relationship with his mother. He keeps being drawn back to her. But what impact do you think his mother's death has on him?
He didn't get any love from his mother. He didn't have any attention. He definitely hated her. So it was like such a chaotic relationship.
I think he'd been set adrift, hadn't he? So he had that very kind of thin thread hanging on to his mother. But when she died, that was gone. So what was there for him to hang on to at this point in time?
After his mother left, he felt like he had so much anger in him, and that boiled, and it was like a bomb that needed to explode.
By 1990, Pekalski is motherless and has been soundly rejected by every woman he has approached. Something finally snaps as his primal need for sex becomes overwhelming.
Bernadetta była mieszkanką tej samej wsi, w której mieszkał Pekalski. Wracała od swojej siostry, taką bardzo ustronną drogą.
Był już wieczór i nagle stwierdziła, że ktoś za nią idzie. Ktoś za nią idzie, no, zaniepokoiła się. No i
Pekalski has been lurking on the outskirts of the village. He's been waiting for a victim.
On się bardzo szybko do niej zbliżył i zaatakował ją. Miał naciągnięty na twarz golf. On zaczął jej grozić, że ją zabije, po czym wciągnął ją w pobliskie zarośla i zgwałcił.
powiedział, że ją zabije i ona w pewnym momencie postanowiła udawać osobę nieżywą. I mówi, tylko myślała, kiedy ją tu znajdzie. Rozpoznała go już w trakcie, bo on tam mieszkał gdzieś w pobliżu, ona go znała. Nie? No, nie wiem, czy go poniosło, czy to, że dopuścił się popełnienia gwałtu na osobie z pobliża, która łatwo go rozpoznała.
Pekalski is arrested for rape, but gets off with a suspended sentence. This arrest doesn't stop him in the slightest. It's widely believed, but never proven, as a result of his confessions, that Pekalski had been conducting a decade-long spree of murder and rape across Poland.
Po gwałcie na Bernadecie Leszek był wciąż człowiekiem wolnym. Nadal przemieszczał się po Polsce, często nocował w lesie, często był głodny. W Polsce doszło do różnych morderstw o podłożu seksualnym. Były w różnych częściach Polski. To było morderstwo mężczyzny, to było morderstwo kobiety, to było morderstwo dziecka. Pojawiła się taka opinia biegłych, że prawdopodobnie sprawcą jest młody mężczyzna o bardzo dużych potrzebach seksualnych.
In June 1991, it was the savage murder of 17-year-old Sylvia that would finally bring Pekalski to public notoriety. He'd been living rough for weeks. Hungry and dishevelled, he seeks food at a nearby shop. There he comes into contact with Sylvia, the young shop assistant.
Ten biedny, brudny poprosił ją, czy może mu dać coś do jedzenia.
Pekalski jest osobą o bardzo niskim intelekcie, jednak trochę nauczył się manipulować otoczeniem.
To rzeczywiście jest taki człowiek, który wzbudza litość i obrzydzenie. Myślę, że on na tym bazował, że on bardzo często wzbudzał w ludziach te dwa uczucia, a kobiety, które miały z nim do czynienia, nigdy nie podejrzewały, jaki to jest groźny osobnik. Sylwia była dobrą, sympatyczną dziewczyną. Zrobiło jej się żal człowieka, który był brudny, śmierdzący, zaniedbany. Ulitowała się nad nim i ta litość ją zgubiła.
Sylvia agrees to bring him some food after work. They arrange to meet in a secluded forest clearing where Pekalski has been sleeping.
Wyglądało to w ten sposób, że rozmawiali, ona go poczęstowała tym, rozmawiali i on zaczął się do niej przytulać. Mówił, że jest samotny, że chciałby mieć żonę.
True to form, Pekalski pesters her to be his girlfriend and wife.
Sylwia się zaczęła śmiać. Mówi, ja twoją kobietą? No jak to, taki obdartus, taki brudas. A on bardzo nie lubił, kiedy się z niego wyśmiewano i to powodowało w nim agresję.
Angry at the rejection, he viciously strikes her in the head with a spade.
Sylwia zmarła od uderzeń, od ciosów w głowę, a potem po śmierci wykorzystał seksualnie jej zwłoki. W nocy Pekalski kilkakrotnie wracał do zwłok Sylwii, które leżały w pobliżu paśnika, w którym spał, i wykorzystywał ponownie te zwłoki.
Pekalski's motive for murder was definitely instant sexual gratification. But I think that this arose out of many, many factors, not least that he's got very, very poor impulse control, possibly as a result of just a feral upbringing, or possibly as a result of early brain damage. And I think that both of those are directly attributable to his mother.
So what set him on this path of rape and murder? And how did his dysfunctional relationship with his mother shape him into the ruthless killer he became? Looking at Leszek Pekalski, what kind of killer do you think he is?
I think he's chaotic, he's disorganised, and he's a piece of the jigsaw puzzle that is never quite going to fit anywhere.
I think he's one of the most curious kind of serial killers that we've ever come across. I think you have to have a great deal of sympathy. The most appalling childhood, the lost affection of his mother and his grandmother gave us the murderer he became.
I think that the mother was the most influential person in his life, and he really seek the contact with her. So that's why he always come back to his house. He wanted her love. He wanted her attention.
So he's just got this constant rejection going on all of the time.
Plus violence, plus sexual abuse, and I think he just didn't manage to create any empathy inside him.
How significant is his childhood in the murderer and rapist that we know he became?
I think it has such a big impact, like the role of his mother, of his grandmother, the absence of his father, and really he didn't build any relationships at all. He felt alone, he felt insecure, he felt like a stranger, so he wanted to take revenge.
It seemed to me his childhood was a roadmap to murder and
You've got that violence and that neglect and that abuse within the immediate family, and then you've got nobody that's challenging that from the community. You've got social institutions which aren't recognising and responding to his needs in any kind of long-term way. So you've got all of these factors are coming together to make him what he becomes.
And actually nobody showed him how to be a valuable human being.
Right from the beginning, I think this lad had very little chance of actually, having a normal life.
Coming up, Pekalski confesses to a spree of murders and across Poland.
He clearly knew that what he had done was wrong and that what he had done would outrage public decency.
Leszek Pekalski is a convicted rapist and murderer who was dubbed by the press the vampire and the beast when his case came to trial. He was accused of sadistic sexual crimes against a range of victims, and no one was apparently safe from his twisted impulses. But mystery still remains over where and when his grotesque desires exploded into murderous rage. Following the murder of 17-year-old Sylwia, Pekalski is arrested and admits to the crime without much interrogation. But Pekalski shocked the police by confessing to more than 80 similar crimes, many of those matching cases which would remain unsolved across Poland for nearly a decade.
W pewnym momencie doszedł do wniosku, że jeżeli będzie mnożył byty tych zdarzeń, to sąd, opinia uzna go za niezrównoważonego psychicznie, prawda? Że to będzie działało na jego korzyść.
He could get more attention and more notoriety and more involvement from other human beings by coming clean and saying there were 80 offences he committed.
But were all the crimes Pekalski confessed to actually all his? Or were they the fantasies of an attention seeker desperate for his 15 minutes of fame?
W trakcie śledztwa okazało się, że część przestępstw, o których opowiada, najpewniej są wymyślone przez niego lub zasugerowane przez policję. Trudno nam tak naprawdę powiedzieć, czy rzeczywiście Pekalski zabił więcej niż jedną ofiarę, chociaż jest to bardzo duże prawdopodobieństwo.
When Pekalski starts to confess, we don't know whether this is actual fact or it's the ramblings of somebody who is intellectually disabled, possibly brain damaged, and whose world is so disordered that he might have completely lost touch with reality.
Over the next 4 years, police investigate Pekalski's claims. Numerous eyewitnesses and his intimate knowledge of many of the crime scenes lead police to believe that he could be responsible for these self-confessed brutal murders over the previous decade.
Policja zabierała go na wizję lokalną. On trafiał w to miejsce, gdzie ta zbrodnia miała miejsce, wchodził do tego mieszkania i mówił, ale dzisiaj są inne ściany. Dzisiaj są żółte, a wcześniej były niebieskie ze szlaczkiem. Znał takie szczegóły, o których nie mógł wiedzieć.
But then Pekalski changed his mind and retracted his confessions to many of the murders and rapes he'd previously claimed, throwing the prosecution into disarray.
He clearly knew that what he had done was wrong and that what he had done would outrage public decency, so he very quickly learned to take that back. That clearly was an act of self-preservation on his part.
With his confession withdrawn and the mishandling of key evidence by the police, Pekalski is only convicted for the murder of 17-year-old Sylvia. He receives a maximum jail term of 25 years. Police and prosecutors still believe there's a strong indication that he was responsible for many of the crimes he originally confessed to.
Do dzisiaj żadna z tych 67 spraw, do których się przyznał, nie znalazła rozwiązania.
Whether it was multiple murders or just one, it seems the roots of his depraved desires were seeded in his childhood from neglect and the lack of maternal care.
I think it's true to say that he wouldn't have become a killer if it hadn't have been for actions taken by his mother.
Also, of course, what she'd started with Pekalski, the care system finished. So almost as if she'd set him up for a really bad childhood, unfortunately the schooling system and the care system wasn't able to reverse the problems that she'd already put into place in his very early developmental years.
Pekalski is a brutal, murdering rapist. Of that, there is no doubt. But is he Poland's most prolific serial sexual killer, or a mentally ill fantasist who thrives on attention? Maybe he's both. Why did he confess to so many murders? Murders he couldn't possibly have committed in some instances.
He's trying to be the centre of attention. He was certainly never the centre of his mother's attention. So by, spurting out these big numbers of people that he's killed, he is very much the focus of attention, and he's never had that before.
He wanted to be famous. He really enjoyed that the press and the media were interested.
Why does he suddenly then retract his evidence? Surely, if he had the audience in the palm of his hand with 80, why suddenly kind of retreat and say, OK, I only did one?
I think this guy is incredibly chaotic. He's all over the place at this point in time. He's got all of this attention. He's fessing up to all of these crimes that perhaps he didn't commit. And he's probably receiving some quite conflicted advice from the people around him. So he's being pulled from pillar to post again, I think.
He was afraid of the death penalty. That was the reason why he made this decision to withdraw all the confessions.
And of course, it must have caused huge chaos when he withdrew that confession.
Exactly, it was like a chaos, completely chaos in the court, and I think this was like one of the main reasons why he was convicted only for one murder.
He's shortly due for potential release.
It's frightening, isn't it, to think that, potentially all of the killings that he may have carried out, if they were for real, is going to be walking the streets one day.
So do you think this is a killer in waiting?
I think this is somebody who really struggles to have normal social interaction with other people. Perhaps in prison he's found some sort of stability, some sort of security, and I think he'd be quite keen not to lose that. So even if he was released, I think he'd reoffend simply just to go back inside.
To what extent can we agree that he is in fact a serial killer and most likely committed more than one murder?
I think we've got the pieces in the puzzle of a serial killer here, but we haven't got them all put together. So we've got somebody who has got the capacity to have done this more than once, but the evidence is few and far between.
He definitely fantasized about more murders, and he wanted to kill more people, but we will never have an answer if he did it.
No one can truly be certain if Pekalski has committed as many murders as he claimed, but with his release imminent, it's certain that law enforcement will be monitoring his behaviour and movements for many years to come.